all of God's people. Well, all of a sudden, back in Egypt, Pharaoh hardened his heart, and he changed his mind. And he kind of goes like, what? What did I do? Why did I let those people go? And all of the Egyptians who had favor on the people, they changed their mind too. And they said, why did we let all of our workers go? We shouldn't have let them go. And Pharaoh goes, I'm going after them. And so Pharaoh got 600 of his strongest warriors and a thing called chariots. And Pharaoh goes, I'm sending 600 of my best soldiers, 600 of my best chariots, and we're going to go after them. And so, all of a sudden, God's people, remember, they're between a rock and a hard place on the sea. They can't go anywhere. And they start screaming out. They see the enemy coming. They hear all the hoof prints and all the soldiers, and they're like, we're going to die. Why? And so they start yelling and screaming, and they tell Moses, why did you bring us out here? We were better off in Egypt. Good things were good in Egypt. Yeah, we were slaves, and they hurt us, and they beat us, but hey, I'd rather be in Egypt than be between a rock and a hard place and the sea where I can't go anywhere. And so this is what Moses told them. He said, don't be afraid. He said, be still. He said, today you're going to see God save you. You're going to see the salvation of the Lord today. He goes, and all of these bad guys, you're not going to see them anymore because God is going to fight for you. And then Moses said the best thing ever. He said, so, shh, be quiet. I love that. Be quiet. Stop your complaining. Stand still and you're going to see God fight for you. And so God spoke to Moses and he said, Moses, he said, I want you to do something. But this is what Jesus did that was so cool. Jesus, remember, he's in the cloud and he's been before all of God's people. He's been leading them. But then Jesus decides he's going to move. Jesus goes, I'm going to move, and I'm going to go behind you. And so, here are the bad guys. The bad guys are coming after God's people. God's people are all over here. And so Jesus does something so amazing. Jesus moves the cloud, and he puts a dark cloud and a light cloud. And Jesus is right in the middle. And so the bad guys are here. God's people are here, and God moves to the back of God's people. So instead of being in front of them, he moves behind them, and now he's going to protect them. The bad guys are there, Jesus is here, and he puts a dark cloud. So all of the bad guys can only see darkness. They can't see God's people. But guess what? God's people have a nice, bright, light cloud. So bad guys have dark, God's people have a nice light. And that's what Jesus does for us. Jesus stands between us and the bad guys. He said, you know what? The bad guys, they're in darkness, but my people are in light. And so Jesus is standing between the bad guys and his people. And he tells Moses, Moses, what are you standing here for? Lift up your rod, lead the way. And so he told Moses, lift up your rod, he said, and you're going to part the water. And so when Moses lifted up his rod, all of a sudden, a big, strong wind happened, and that ocean parted. And now, the ocean went up like this, and God's people were able to walk across it on dry land. So God made a way. He blew the big wind, and the waves parted. You see that? And all of God's people were able to make it across on dry land. God is so amazing that he made it not muddy, but dry. Well, after all of God's people were across, then God told Moses, Moses, lift up your rod again. And all of the chariots had decided to follow God's people. So God's people were safe. They were on the other side. The chariots started coming after him. Moses lifted up his rod, and the waves came back. And it covered all of the bad guys, got covered in the water. And they all drowned. And God's people were safe on one side, and all of the bad guys were gone. Just like God said, you're never going to see these bad guys again. I'm going to fight for you. And that's what God did. They were all safe on the other side. And when God's people saw God do that mighty miracle, they believed in him, and they feared God, and they believed in Moses. So we're going to watch a